It started with a lie. The biggest lie I've ever told. To the person I love most in the world. My mother. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, my road to Marco Vitali was paved with a desperate phone call on a rainy October night. And if I'm being completely honest, I'd walk that road again. Every single time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. The real beginning. October 23rd. That's the date everything changed. It was a Tuesday, which feels fitting somehow. Nothing important ever happens on a Tuesday, right? Tuesdays are for barely getting by, for putting one foot in front of the other. And hoping you make it to Wednesday. I'd been working at Luciano's Italian restaurant in Carroll Gardens for 8 months. Double shifts mostly. Sometimes triples when Maria called in sick or when Tony needed someone to cover the late-night crowd. The money wasn't great. Minimum wage plus tips. But it was honest work. And in my neighborhood, honest work was something to be grateful for. That particular Tuesday had been brutal. The lunch rush never ended. Some corporate event meant we were slammed. From 11 a.m. until 9 p.m. My feet were screaming. My back felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. And I'd smiled so much my face hurt. But I couldn't go home yet. I never could anymore. See, 3 months earlier, my mom, Maria Elena Martinez, the strongest woman I've ever known, had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Never smoked a day in her life. Worked as a housekeeper in Manhattan for 30 years. Breathing in God knows what kind of chemicals from all those cleaning products. And now her lungs were killing her. The doctors at Mount Sinai had given us options. Chemotherapy. Radiation. The standard protocols. Our insurance, barely adequate on a good day, would cover most of it. Most. Not all. Never all. But there was this new treatment. Immunotherapy, they called it. A clinical trial showing incredible results. People who should have died were living. Thriving. Even there was just one problem. The insurance company had denied it. Classified it as experimental. Too risky. Too expensive. Not proven enough. Translation: your mother's life isn't worth the cost. I'd fought them. God, I'd fought them. Spent hours on the phone with customer service representatives reading from scripts, with supervisors who apologized but couldn't help, with appeals departments that denied everything on principle. I'd lost every fight. The treatment cost $180,000 for the first round. I had $3,400 in my savings account. I'd been working every shift I could find, picking up extra hours at a coffee shop in the mornings, walking dogs on my days off. In 3 months I'd manage to save another $1,100. Do the math. At my current rate, I'd have enough money roughly around the time my mother would be dead. So yeah. October 23rd. That Tuesday. I'd just gotten another call from Dr. Richardson's office. Another gentle reminder that we needed to make a decision about treatment. Another polite inquiry about when we might be able to discuss payment arrangements. I told them I needed more time. I didn't have more time. Mom didn't have more time. But what else could I say? After my shift ended at 11, I couldn't go home. Not yet. I needed a moment to fall apart before I pulled myself together enough to visit Mom at the hospital. To smile at her. To lie to her. To tell her everything would be fine. The restaurant had closed at 10. My manager, Tony, had left around 10:30. I had a key, one of the perks of being the most reliable employee. I'd used it twice before when I needed a quiet place to cry. I let myself in through the back door. The kitchen was dark, quiet, smelling like garlic and tomato sauce and bread. Comforting smells. Safe smells. I made my way to the dining room, planning to sit for just a few minutes. Just long enough to get my breathing under control. That's when my phone rang. Mom's nurse. Linda. My heart stopped. Calls at 11:47 p.m. were never good news. Hello. Sophie, hi, it's Linda. Don't panic, your mom's fine. But she's asking for you. He's pretty agitated. Keeps saying she needs to talk to you about the treatment. Oh God. He knew. Somehow she knew I'd been lying. I'll call her right now. I hung up with Linda and stood there in the dark restaurant, phone clutched in both hands, trying to figure out how to keep lying. How to keep the hope alive in her eyes for just a little bit longer. Because once she knew the truth, that I couldn't save her, that I'd failed her, that all my promises were empty, what would she have left? I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Mija. And just like that, I became someone I didn't recognize. A perfect liar. Hey Mom. I'm so sorry I'm calling late. I know you were waiting to hear from me. He sounded so weak. So fragile. Nothing like the woman who'd raised me alone after Dad died. Nothing like the woman who'd worked 3 jobs to put me through college. Nothing like the warrior who'd taught me that Martina's women didn't break. The treatment, Sophie. Did you talk to the doctor about the treatment? I turned away from the darkness of the dining room, facing the kitchen, as if looking away from the world would make the lie easier. I did, Mama. I talked to Dr. Richardson today. He said the insurance approved everything. The new clinical trial, the medications, all of it. Silence on the other end. Long enough that I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Long enough that I almost confessed. Almost told the truth. Then, Mija, are you telling me the truth? The question hit me like a physical blow. She knew me too well. Could hear the crack in my voice, the fraction of a second where the lie tried to stick in my throat. Of course, Mama. Would I lie to you about this? As I thought. I absolutely would. Because the truth will kill you faster than the cancer. The treatments start next month, I continued, each word feeling like I was swallowing glass. You just need to focus on getting stronger, okay? Eat the meals the nurse brings. Take your medications. Let me worry about everything else. But the money, Sophie. I told you not to worry about money. I got that promotion at the restaurant, remember? Another lie. There was no promotion. There would never be a promotion. And I picked up those extra shifts. We're fine, Mama. I promise we're fine. The biggest lie of all. We weren't fine. We were drowning. And I was the only one who knew it. I love you, Mama, I whispered, tears starting to blur my vision. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Get some sleep. Te amo, Mija. You're my good girl. My strong girl. I ended the call before she could hear me break. And then I did. I broke. Completely. Slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold tile floor of that kitchen. Knees pulled to my chest and cried like I was dying. As part of me was. I cried for my mother. For the lie I'd just told her. For all the lies I'd have to keep telling until she was gone. Cried for myself. For the helplessness, the fear, the absolute certainty that I was going to lose the only family I had left. I cried until my throat was raw and my chest hurt and I couldn't breathe properly. And that's when I heard the voice. How much do you need? I swear to God, my heart actually stopped. Just stopped beating for a solid 3 seconds. My head snapped up so fast I heard something crack in my neck. And there, sitting in the corner booth like he'd materialized from my worst nightmare, was a man. Not just any man. Marco Vitali. I'd seen him exactly 3 times in my 8 months at Luciano's. He never came during business hours. Never interacted with customers. But everyone knew who he was. Tony would get a phone call and suddenly we were closing early. Or certain booths were reserved. Or men in expensive suits would arrive and have quiet conversations over wine that cost more than my rent. Giovanni Vitali owned the restaurant. But Marco Vitali, his son, owned everything else. Including, according to the whispers I'd heard in the kitchen, half of Brooklyn. He sat there in the shadows wearing dark clothes that probably cost more than my car. Even in the dim light I could see him clearly. Tall, well over 6 feet. Broad shoulders. Dark hair styled perfectly despite the late hour. And eyes. God. Those eyes. So dark they were almost black, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Or maybe not crawl. Maybe something else. Something I didn't want to name. Mr. Vitali. I'm so sorry, I didn't know anyone was here. I just needed to. I was scrambling to my feet. Apologies spilling out faster than I could think them. I'll leave right now. I'm so sorry. Please don't tell Tony. I can't lose this job. I can't. How much? He repeated. His voice was deep. Calm. The kind of calm that came from never being afraid of anything. I froze halfway to the door. What? For your mother's treatment. How much do you need? The words hit me like ice water. How did he know? How could he possibly know about my mother? I don't know what you're talking about. He stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. And even though he didn't move aggressively, every muscle in my body screamed. Danger. This was a predator. And I was very small prey. You're Sophie Martinez, he said. Not a question. A statement. You've worked here for 8 months. You take every double shift Tony offers. You never call in sick. You never complain. And you never ever ask for time off. Each word felt like he was reading from a file. Like he'd been watching me. Studying me. He took a step closer. I wanted to back away but my legs wouldn't move. Your mother has stage 4 lung cancer. She's at Mount Sinai Hospital. The insurance company denied the new immunotherapy treatment because they've classified it as experimental. My vision started to blur at the edges. This couldn't be happening. This man, this stranger, knew everything. How do you know? The treatment costs $180,000 for the first round. Your mother doesn't have it. You don't have it. So you're lying to her. Telling her everything's fine while you work yourself to death trying to figure out how to save her. Who the hell are you? For just a second, maybe less, something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like pain. Almost like recognition. Someone who knows what it's like to lie to the person you love most because the truth would destroy them. We stared at each other across that empty restaurant. The rain hammered against the windows. The refrigerators hummed. In the kitchen. And the entire world seemed to shrink down to just the two of us and the impossible thing he just implied. I don't need your help, I said. My voice shook, betraying the lie. Yes, Marco said quietly. You do. Why would you even offer? You don't know me. No. But I knew my mother. And I know what I would have done, what I did do, to buy her more time. He pulled out his phone. Type something. His fingers moved quickly, confidently. Like he was sending a text or an email. I just transferred $200,000 to Mount Sinai's billing department. Directed to your mother's account. Maria Elena. Martinez, room 847. The world tilted. Actually tilted. I grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. What? No, I can't accept that. I can't possibly. It's done. I'll pay you back. Every penny. I'll work for free. You'll do nothing, he interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. Except let your mother get the treatment she needs. Why? My voice broke completely. Why would you do this for a complete stranger? Marco was quiet for a long moment. The kind of silence that feels heavy with things left unsaid. Then, because I couldn't save my mother. Maybe I can save yours. And just like that he walked past me. Headed for the door. Left me standing there in shock, unable to process what had just happened. He paused at the exit. Without turning around he said, "There's a business card on the counter. If you need anything else, call that number." Then he was gone. Disappeared into the rain and the night like he'd never been there at all. Except he had been. And he'd just changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I drove straight to Mount Sinai, even though it was past midnight. Convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. That I'd had some kind of breakdown. That Marco Vitali was a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion and desperation. But when I got to the hospital, when I logged into Mom's patient portal on the computer in the waiting room, there it was. Payment received, $200,000. Treatment approved. Start date, October 26th. I sat there in that sterile waiting room staring at the screen and I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't process that. Someone, a stranger, a man I'd seen 3 times in my life, had just saved my mother. Why would anyone do that? I didn't have an answer. And that scared me almost as much as the cancer had. The next morning I called the number on the business card. A woman answered. Professional, polished voice. Vitali Enterprises, this is Patricia. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with Marco Vitali. Please. May I ask who's calling? Sophie Martinez. He'll know who I am. Boss. I'm sorry, Ms. Martinez, but Mr. Vitali doesn't take unscheduled calls. If you'd like to leave a message, tell him I need to talk to him about the money. Tell him I can't accept it without understanding why. Another pause, longer this time. Please hold. Elevator music. 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. Then, Ms. Martinez, Mr. Vitali's schedule is fully booked for the next 2 weeks. However, if you'd like to come to our offices, I can arrange for you to meet with our finance department to discuss. No. I need to talk to him. Just him. Please. I understand, but I'm not leaving until I see him. I don't know what possessed me to say that, but something about the way Patricia paused, like she was reconsidering, made me think it might work. You're at the office? She asked. Not yet, but I will be. In 20 minutes. And I'm not leaving the lobby until he agrees to see me. I hung up before she could respond. Vitali Enterprises was in Midtown Manhattan. A gleaming tower of glass and steel that probably cost more to build than my entire neighborhood was worth. I stood outside for 5 minutes, working up the courage to walk through those doors. I was wearing my best outfit, and by best, I mean the only dress I owned that didn't have a stain on it. Black, simple. Bought from a thrift store 3 years ago for a job interview I didn't get. My shoes were scuffed. My hair was pulled back in a ponytail because I didn't have time to wash it. I looked exactly like what I was, a waitress way out of her depth. But I walked through those doors anyway. The lobby was intimidating. Marble floors. Modern art on the walls. People in suits that cost more than I made in 6 months. Everyone looked important. Everyone looked like they belonged. I belonged at Luciano's, serving spaghetti and refilling water glasses. But I walked up to the reception desk anyway. I'm here to see Marco Vitali. The receptionist, a young guy with perfect hair and a perfectly practiced smile, didn't even look up from his computer. Do you have an appointment? No. But he's expecting me. Now he looked up. Took in my dress, my shoes, my complete lack of business-appropriate anything. Your name? Sophie Martinez. He typed something, frowned, typed something else. I don't see you on his calendar. Call Patricia. She'll confirm. His frown deepened, but he picked up the phone. Whispered conversation I couldn't quite hear. Then his eyes widened. Slightly. He hung up. Please take a seat, Ms. Martinez. Someone will be down to escort you shortly. I'd won round 1. I sat in one of the leather chairs, probably worth more than my couch, and waited. Watched important people come and go. Overhead conversations about mergers and acquisitions and stock options. Felt completely, utterly out of place. 20 minutes later, an older woman emerged from the elevators. She was maybe 60 with steel gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ms. Martinez? I'm Patricia. Please come with me. We rode the elevator in silence. Up. Past the 20th floor. The 30th. The 40th. The doors opened on the 42nd floor. It was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Sleek modern furniture. Art that belonged in museums. This wasn't just an office. This was power translated into interior design. Patricia led me down a long hallway. At the end, double doors stood open. And there he was. Marco Vitali. Sitting behind a massive desk, reviewing something on his computer. He traded the dark casual clothes from the restaurant for a charcoal suit that fit him so perfectly it had to be custom-made. He looked every inch the legitimate businessman. But I'd grown up in East Harlem. I knew a wolf in expensive clothing when I saw one. Miss Martinez, he said without looking up. I wasn't expecting you. I need to pay you back. I stayed in the doorway, clutching my purse like it might protect me from whatever was coming. I've done the math. If I work 3 jobs and don't spend anything on myself, I can pay you back in approximately 7 years. Now he did look up. One dark eyebrow raised. 7 years. Maybe 6 if I pick up holiday shifts. And your mother? Who takes care of her while you're working 3 jobs? My jaw tightened. I'll figure it out. No, Marco said simply, standing up. You won't accept the money as a gift. You won't bankrupt yourself trying to repay an impossible debt. So we need another arrangement. What kind of arrangement? He moved around the desk. When he got close, I noticed things I hadn't in the dim restaurant. A thin scar above his left eyebrow, eyes so dark they were almost black, and something haunted hiding behind his carefully controlled expression. Work for me, he said. I blinked. I already work for your father's restaurant. No. Work for me. My personal assistant quit last month. I need someone organized, discreet, and desperate enough to do whatever needs to be done without asking too many questions. My eyes narrowed. What kind of work are we talking about? Scheduling. Correspondence. Managing my calendar. Accompanying me to business dinners and charity events. Normal. Assistant duties. You're lying. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost smiled. What makes you say that? Because men like you don't need assistants. You need something else. And you're looking at me like I'm either a problem to solve or a piece on a chessboard you're trying to figure out how to move. For the first time since I'd met him, Marco smiled. Really smiled. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger. Less dangerous. More dangerous. Smart, he said. That's good. I need smart. He moved back to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a contract. An actual contract, like he'd been expecting this. Like he'd planned for it. 6 months. You work as my personal assistant. In exchange, your mother's medical bills, all of them current and future, are covered. Plus a salary of $150,000. My head spun. That was more than I made in 3 years. What's the catch? The catch, Marco said slowly, is that you'll be in my world. You'll meet people who do bad things. You'll overhear conversations you can't repeat. You'll see sides of business that aren't exactly legal. He pinned me with that dark gaze. Can you handle that? I don't have a choice, do I? Everyone has a choice. Do they? I shot back. Because from where I'm standing, my choices are watch my mother die or work for a man who's basically blackmailing me with kindness. I prefer to think of it as mutually beneficial employment. And I prefer to think of it as a deal with the devil. Marco's smile widened. Then it's lucky for both of us that I'm not the devil. Just his business associate. I should have walked out. Should have refused. Should have found another way. But when I thought of my mother in that hospital bed, weak and fragile and trusting me to fix everything. When I thought of Dr. Richardson saying she was a candidate for the treatment. When I thought of having to call her and tell her the truth. That I'd failed, that I couldn't save her, that we were out of options. I picked up the pen. And I signed the contract. Working for Marco Vitali was not what I expected. I'd imagined shadowy meetings in dark rooms. Briefcases full of cash. Maybe some light money laundering. You know, typical mob stuff from the movies. Instead, I spent my first week learning how to use 3 different calendar systems, memorizing the names and faces of approximately 40 business associates and figuring out how Marco took his coffee. Black 2 sugars, but only in the morning. Afternoon espresso. Always espresso. Patricia trained me. She'd worked for the Vitali family for 20 years and she knew everything. He taught me which calls to put through immediately, which to screen, and which to redirect to other departments. He taught me how to read Marco's mood from the set of his shoulders. She taught me that when he got quiet, really quiet, that's when you needed to be most careful. He's not cruel, Patricia told me on my 3rd day. But he's not soft either. He expects excellence, loyalty, discretion, above all else. And if I mess up? She gave me a look that was equal parts sympathy and warning. Don't. The work itself was intense but manageable. I scheduled meetings, managed correspondence, prepared briefing documents for business dinners. I accompanied Marco to restaurants where the menus didn't have prices and everyone knew his name. I sat quietly in the corner of conference rooms while men in expensive suits discussed shipping routes and construction contracts and labor negotiations. It all seemed legitimate. Almost boringly legitimate. I started to relax. Started to think maybe I'd misjudged him. Maybe Marco Vitali was just a successful businessman with a reputation darker than his actual deeds. Maybe this would be fine. I lasted exactly 2 weeks before I discovered how wrong I was. It was a Thursday night. Late October, the kind of cold that cuts through your jacket and settles in your bones. Marco had a meeting in Red Hook, a neighborhood even native New Yorkers were cautious about after dark. I wasn't supposed to go. He'd made that clear. Stay at the office. I'll be back in 2 hours. But an hour into his meeting, I realized he'd forgotten an important folder. Contracts that needed to be signed tonight. Time-sensitive documents that couldn't wait. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Same result. Patricia had already left for the day. It was just me in that big office holding a folder that apparently couldn't wait until tomorrow, trying to decide what to do. I made a choice. Probably the wrong choice. But I grabbed my coat, grabbed the folder, and looked up the address Marco had left with security. A warehouse in Red Hook. Of course it was a warehouse. Why was it always a warehouse? The cab driver gave me a look when I told him the address. You sure, miss? I'm sure. Want me to wait? No. I'll be fine. Another lie. I was getting good at those. The warehouse was exactly what you'd imagine. Gray, looming, the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody asked questions. There were cars outside, expensive ones. Black town cars with tinted windows. Men in suits. Standing by the entrance, smoking cigarettes and talking in low voices. I approached slowly, clutching the folder like a shield. I need to give this to Marco Vitali. It's urgent. The men looked at each other. One of them spoke into a radio. A moment later he shook his head. Mr. Vitali is in a meeting. He can't be disturbed. But leave it with me. I'll make sure he gets it. Something in his tone made me uneasy. Like he'd throw the folder in a dumpster the moment I left. I need to give it to him personally. Please. It's important. Lady, I said. And that's when I heard the shouting. Male voices, angry, coming from inside the warehouse. Then a sound that might have been something hitting something else. Or someone. Every instinct I had screamed at me to leave. To give the folder to the guard and get back in a cab and pretend I'd never been here. But I've never been good at listening to my instincts. I moved away from the entrance, around the side of the building, looking for another way to see what was happening. Maybe a window. Maybe a door left ajar. I found a window. Grimy, covered in years of city dirt, but I could see through it if I stood on my toes. What I saw made my blood freeze. Marco stood in the center of a circle of men. Maybe 6 of them, all in suits, all watching. And on his knees in front of Marco, hands tied behind his back, bleeding from his mouth, was another man. He looked terrified. Marco looked cold. Not angry. Not violent. Just cold. Like he was discussing the weather instead of looming over a bleeding, bound man. You stole from me, Tommy, Marco said quietly. His voice carried in the empty warehouse. Worse, you stole from the families who depend on me. You stole food from children. Medicine from sick people. You stole hope. Marco, please. Tommy's voice was raw, desperate. I gave you chances. Jobs. Money. I helped your sister when she was sick. I paid for your nephew's surgery. Marco crouched down to eye level with the bleeding man. And you repaid me by skimming from the union pension fund. I'll pay it back. I swear. Just give me time. I know you will. Marco stood. Nodded to someone I couldn't see. Break his hands. Both of them. Make sure he remembers what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. The folder slipped from my hands. It hit the concrete with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet night. Every man in that warehouse turned toward the window. Including Marco. Our eyes met through the dirty glass. His expression didn't change. Didn't show surprise or anger or concern. He just looked at me. Through me. Like he could see every thought racing through my terrified mind. Like he'd known. Somehow that I'd come. That I'd see. Then he said something to his men and walked toward the door. Toward me. I ran. Didn't think. Didn't plan. Just turned and ran toward where I'd had the cab drop me off, fumbling for my phone trying to call another cab, trying to get away from what I'd just seen. I made it maybe 50 feet before a hand caught my arm. The firm. Marco spun me around. You weren't supposed to see that. His voice was calm. Too calm. Like he was discussing a minor inconvenience instead of the fact that I'd just watched him order someone's hands broken. Let me go. I tried to pull away. He didn't let me. I will. But first you need to understand something. Understand? Understand what? That you're exactly what everyone says you are? That I just signed a contract with that man in there? Tommy Rizzo? He stole $400,000 from a pension fund that supports 70 families. Widows. Children. People who have nothing else. He stole their futures to feed his gambling addiction. So you break his hands? So I make sure he never forgets what he did. And I make sure everyone else remembers what happens when you steal. From the innocent. The innocent? You're breaking someone's hands and you want to talk about the innocent. Marco's grip on my arm tightened slightly. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to make sure I was listening. You wanted to know what working for me really meant? This is it, Sophie. I'm not a good man. I don't make good choices. But I protect what's mine. And I punish people who hurt the vulnerable. I want out, I whispered. I want out of this contract. No, you don't. Yes, Your mother started the treatment 3 days ago. Marco finally released my arm. Sit back. Dr. Richardson says. She's responding better than expected. He has a real chance now. A chance she didn't have 2 weeks ago. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. You want to walk away? Fine. But your mother goes back on the waiting list for treatments that may never come. Dies knowing you gave up on her. It was the cruelest thing he could have said. And we both knew it was true. My hands clenched into fists. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. I hate you. Good, Marco said simply. Hate keeps you alert. Hate keeps you alive. But hate doesn't pay medical bills. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in your car, drive home, and show up to work tomorrow like nothing happened. Because nothing did happen. You didn't see anything tonight. You were never here. And if I tell someone? If I go to the police? Marco's laugh was bitter. Half the police department is on my payroll, Sophie. The other half knows better than to come after me. But sure, try if it makes you feel better. Just know that the moment you do, you're not my employee. You're a liability. He let the threat hang in the air between us. I should have been terrified. And I was. But underneath the terror was something else. Something I didn't want to examine too closely. Because when Marco looked at me in that moment, there was something in his eyes that wasn't threat. It was almost regret. I don't want to hurt you, he said, his voice softer now. Despite what you just saw, I don't hurt innocent people. But I need you to be smart. Be quiet. And trust that everything I do, even the terrible things, has a reason. What reason could possibly justify breaking someone's hands? 70 families, Sophie. 70 families who were counting on that pension money to survive. Widows who've lost their husbands. Kids who need food and clothes and school supplies. Tommy Rizzo took their futures and gambled them. So yes, I broke his hands. Because the alternative is letting him get away with it. And when word spreads that you can steal from me without consequences, more people steal. More families suffer. That's not justice. That's revenge. No, Marco said quietly. That's survival. In my world, mercy is seen as weakness. Weakness gets you killed. Gets the people depending on you killed. I learned that lesson young, and I learned it hard. He pulled out his phone, pressed a button. A moment later, one of the black town cars pulled up beside us. Get in. My driver will take you home. I can get my own cab. Sophie. He opened the car door. Get in. Please. It wasn't a request. Not really. but the pleas softened it enough that I obeyed. I slid into the back seat. Expensive leather. Too warm. Too safe. Too much a reminder that I was in way over my head. Marco leaned down, one hand on the open door. Tomorrow morning. We have a meeting with the construction union. Don't be late. Then he closed the door and the car pulled away, leaving him standing in that terrible neighborhood outside that terrible warehouse, looking more alone than anyone should look. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tommy Rizzo on his knees. Heard Marco's cold voice ordering his hands broken. Felt the weight of the choice I'd made, stay and be complicit in violence or leave and watch my mother die. Some choice. At 7:45 a.m., I was standing outside Vitali Enterprises. Professional clothes. Hair pulled back. Makeup covering the dark. Circles under my eyes. Looking like someone who had her life together. Looking like a liar. Patricia was already at her desk when I arrived on the 42nd floor. She took one look at me and sighed. You saw something last night. It wasn't a question. I don't know what you're talking about. Sophie. She stood, moved closer, lowered her voice. I've worked for this family for 20 years. I know the signs. You have the same look I had after my first incident. What happened? In your incident? Patricia's expression went distant. Something I can never talk about. Something I learned to accept because the alternative was worse. She focused on me again. Whatever you saw, whatever you think you know about Marco, remember this, he's not a monster. He's a man trying to survive in a world that punishes kindness. Everything he does for a reason. That's what he said. That everything has a reason. But Patricia, he ordered. I know. She cut me off with a sharp gesture. I know. But I also know about your mother. About the treatment. About the fact that without Marco she'd be dying right now with no hope. Her voice softened. We all make compromises, Sophie. The question is, can you live with yours? Before I could answer, Marco's office door opened. He looked perfect. Suit pressed, hair styled, expression controlled. Like he hadn't spent last night in a warehouse. Threatening violence. Like he was just another businessman starting another day. Miss Martinez. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Vitali. If he noticed the chill in my voice, he didn't show it. The union meeting is at 10. We need to review the contracts before. My office. I followed him inside. The door closed behind us with a soft click that felt final. Marco moved to his desk, pulled out a thick folder of documents. These are the proposed terms for the construction project in Queens. The union wants better benefits. We need to negotiate down without causing a strike. Why are you telling me this? Because you're my assistant. You need to understand the business. The legitimate business, you mean? Marco set down the folder. Looked at me directly. You want to talk about last night? No. I want to pretend last night never happened. That's what you told me to do, right? Pretend I didn't see anything. But you did see something. And now you're looking at me like I'm a monster. Aren't you? The question hung between us. For a long moment Marco said nothing. Just studied me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then, yes. Probably. But I'm your monster now, Sophie. And that means I'm the monster who keeps your mother alive. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that I didn't need a monster, that I could find another way, that I wasn't going to be bought with blood money. But the words stuck in my throat. Because he was right. He was keeping my mother alive. And I was willing to make a deal with a monster to save her. What did that make me? The meeting's in 90 minutes, Marco said, returning to the contracts like we hadn't just had that conversation. Sit down. I'll walk you through the terms. And I did. I sat down. I listened. I learned. I became complicit. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks of living a double life. By day I was Sophie Martinez, personal assistant to Marco Vitali. I scheduled meetings, prepared documents, accompanied him to business dinners and charity galas. I smiled at his associates, remembered their wives' names, made Small talk about the weather and the Yankees and the best restaurants in Manhattan. By night, I visited my mother in the hospital and watched her get stronger. The treatment was working. Dr. Richardson used words like remarkable and unprecedented response. Mom was eating more, sleeping better, even talking about going home soon. He asked about work. I told her it was good. Challenging but good. Another lie. But what else could I say? I tried to maintain boundaries with Marco. Professional distance. But it was impossible when I spent 12 hours a day in his orbit. I learned things. Small things. Important things. I learned that he was always the first to arrive at the office and the last to leave. That he read extensively, philosophy, history, biographies of men who'd built empires. That he had a scar above his left eyebrow from a knife fight when he was 19. That he visited his father's grave every Sunday morning no matter what. I learned that he was generous with his employees. That he paid for Patricia's daughter's college tuition. That he'd set up a fund for the children of workers injured on construction sites. That he donated anonymously to hospitals and schools and community centers throughout Brooklyn. I learned that people feared him, yes, but they also respected him, sometimes even loved him. And I learned that he was lonely. I saw it in quiet moments. When meetings ended and his associates filed out, laughing and clapping each other on the back, and Marco stayed behind alone in his office. When his phone rang and he'd glance at the screen then silence it without answering. When he'd stand at his window looking out at the city, his expression distant and sad. He had everything. Money, power, respect, fear. Everything except someone to share it with. Not that it was my problem. I was just his assistant. His employee. The girl he'd bought with $200,000 and a contract. But still. I'd noticed. The first Saturday in December, Marco informed me I'd be accompanying him to a charity gala. Black tie. Manhattan's. Elite. $500 plates. I don't have anything to wear to something like that, I protested. I've arranged for a stylist to meet you tomorrow. She'll handle everything. Mr. Vitali. Marco. When it's just us, call me Marco. The way he said it, quiet, almost intimate, made something flutter in my chest that I absolutely did not want to examine. Marco, I corrected. I'm your assistant, not your date. Why do I need to go to a gala? Because these events are part of the business. You need to meet people, understand the networks, see how everything connects. He paused. And because I'd rather have someone I trust beside me than go alone. You trust me. You haven't told anyone about the warehouse. You've kept your word. So yes, Sophie. I trust you. The stylist, a woman named Gabriella who looked like she'd stepped out of Vogue, arrived at my apartment on Sunday. With an entourage. They brought dresses, shoes, jewelry, makeup. Transformed my tiny studio into a fashion runway. Mr. Vitali has exquisite taste, Gabriella said, holding up a deep blue gown that probably cost more than my car. He specifically requested this color. Said it would complement your eyes. He said that. He did. Try it on. The dress fit perfectly. Like it had been made for me. Probably because it had, Gabriella admitted Marco had sent her my measurements in advance. Which was both thoughtful and slightly invasive. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked elegant. Sophisticated. Like she belonged in Marco Vitali's world. Like a beautiful lie. The night of the gala, Marco picked me up himself. No driver. Just him in a black tux that made him look like he'd stepped out of a movie. When I opened the door, he went still. Sophie. You look stunning. Thank you. Gabriella did all the work. Gabriella chose the dress. You make it beautiful. The compliment hit me harder than it should have. I wasn't supposed to care what Marco thought about how I looked. He was my employer. My keeper. The man holding my mother's life in his hands. But I blushed anyway. The gala was at the Plaza Hotel. Chandeliers and champagne and women dripping in diamonds. I'd never felt more out of place in my life. But Marco stayed close. Introduced me to everyone. This is Sophie Martinez, my assistant. Said it with a pride that felt genuine. Like I was someone important instead of a waitress playing dress-up. I met politicians and CEOs and socialites. Made polite conversation about art and theater and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Smiled until my face hurt. And I watched Marco work the room. He was magnetic. Charismatic in a way I hadn't seen before. People gravitated to him, wanted his attention, his approval. He gave them exactly what they needed. A joke, a compliment, a promise to call. About a business opportunity. He was performing. Just like I was. But occasionally he'd glance over at me. Make sure I was okay. Bring me champagne. Rest his hand on the small of my back as we moved through the crowd. Touch that was professional. Proactive. Touch that made my skin burn. We were standing near the silent auction tables when a man approached. Older, maybe 60, with silver hair and calculating eyes. Marco Vitali. I didn't expect to see you here. Marco's entire demeanor changed. His smile stayed in place, but it didn't reach his eyes. Councilman Brennan. Oh, is it? Pleasure. Is it? Brennan's gaze slid to me. Lingered too long. And who's this lovely creature? My assistant. Sophie Martinez. Assistant. Brennan's tone made it clear he thought I was something else entirely. How modern of you. Marco's hand on my back pressed slightly firmer. A warning. To me or to Brennan, I wasn't sure. Sophie has been invaluable to my operations, Marco said smoothly. I don't know how I managed without her. I'm sure you don't. Brennan's smile was oily. Tell me, Marco, have you reconsidered my proposal? The zoning variance for the Brooklyn project. I have. And my answer is still no. That's unfortunate. I'd hate for there to be complications with your permits. The air between them went cold. Other guests nearby seemed to sense it, moving away slightly, creating a bubble of space around our small group. Are you threatening me, Councilman? Marco's voice was soft. Dangerous. Not at all. Simply pointing out that business in this city requires cooperation. Mutual support. Brennan glanced at me. It would be a shame if something happened to interfere with your current arrangements. My blood went cold. He was threatening me. Through innuendo and political doublespeak, but the message was clear. Marco moved slightly, positioning himself between me and Brennan. Touch her, he said quietly, and I will destroy. Not quickly. Not cleanly. I will dismantle your career, your reputation, your life piece by piece until there's nothing left but regret and ruin. I'd never heard him sound like that. Cold, yes. Controlled always. But this was something else. This was deadly promise. Brennan paled slightly. There's no need for threats. That wasn't a threat. That was information. Marco took my elbow gently. Now if you'll excuse us, I see someone I actually want to talk to. He guided me away through the crowd, out onto a balcony overlooking Central Park. The cold December air hit my bare shoulders, making me shiver. Marco immediately shrugged out of his tux jacket and draped it over me. I'm sorry, he said. Brennan is a parasite. I should have kept you away from him. He threatened me. Why? Because he knows the fastest way to hurt me is through the people I care about. You care about me? Marco was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Raw in a way I'd never heard. Yes, Sophie. I care about you. More than I should. More than is smart. He turned to face me fully. You were supposed to be temporary. An employee. A transaction. But somewhere in the last 2 months you became something else. What? Something I can't afford to lose. My heart was racing. We were standing too close. His jacket smelled like him, expensive cologne and something uniquely Marco. The city lights sparkled below us. And in that moment on that balcony the entire world felt like it had shrunk down to just the two of us. This is a bad idea, I whispered. I know. I'm your employee. This crosses every line. I know. I should keep my distance. Stay professional. You should. But I don't want to. Neither do I. He stepped closer. raised one hand to cup my face. His palm was warm against my cold cheek. His thumb brushed my and the way he looked at me like I was something precious, something worth protecting, something more than just a waitress he'd bought, made my breath catch. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. "Tell me you don't feel this too and I'll step back. We'll go back inside. We'll forget this conversation ever happened." I should have. God, I should have told him to stop. Should have reminded him about the power imbalance, the contract, the fact that my mother's life depended on staying in his good graces. Should have done so many things differently. Instead I said, "I can't. Can't tell me to stop? Or can't forget?" Both. Marco smiled. That real smile, the one that transformed his face. Then he leaned down and kissed me. Kissing Marco Vitali was like stepping off a cliff. Terrifying and exhilarating and utterly irreversible. His lips were soft against mine. Gentle at first, asking permission. When I kissed him back, and God help me I did, the gentleness shifted into something more intense. More desperate. His hand tangled in my hair. My hands gripped his shirt. We kissed like we were drowning and the other person was air. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against mine. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. You could lose everything if this goes wrong. I know that too. I can't promise to be good for you, Sophie. I can't promise to be the man you deserve. Then promise to be honest with me. Promise not to lie. That's all I need." Marco pulled back slightly, looked at me with those intense dark eyes. "I promise." We stayed on that balcony for another 20 minutes, talking quietly about everything and nothing. About his childhood. In Brooklyn. About my mother and her improving health. About the impossible situation we'd found ourselves in. Eventually the cold drove us back inside. But something had shifted between us. Something fundamental. The rest of the gala passed in a blur. We stayed for another hour. Appearances mattered, Marco explained. Then he drove me home. He walked me to my door. Kissed me again, softer this time. Less desperate. More like a promise. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll figure this out tomorrow." "Okay. Good night, Sophie." "Good night, Marco." I didn't sleep that night either. But this time it wasn't from fear or guilt. It was from the memory of his kiss. The feeling. Of his hands on my face. The way he'd looked at me like I mattered. Like I was more than a transaction. I was falling for him. The monster. The man who broke people's hands and controlled half of Brooklyn and lived in a world of violence and darkness. I was falling for him and I couldn't stop. Didn't want to stop. God help me. I showed up to work Monday morning expecting something. Awkwardness maybe. Or Marco pretending the kiss never happened. Or worse, him telling me it was a mistake and we needed to maintain professional boundaries. Instead there were flowers on my desk. White roses. At least 24. With a card that read, "Thank you for last night. M." Patricia walked past, saw them and raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's new." "It's not, we didn't," I stammered. "Relax, honey. Whatever's happening between you two is your business." She paused at her desk. "Just be careful. Marco's world is complicated. And the people in it don't play nice." Before I could respond, Marco's office door opened. He looked at me. Just looked. And the heat in that gaze made my cheeks burn. "Good morning, Sophie. My office, please." I followed him inside. The door closed behind us. And suddenly we were alone in a space that felt too small and too charged. "About last night," I started. Marco crossed the distance between us in 3 strides. Cupped my face in both hands. Kissed me with an intensity that stole my breath. When he pulled back he was smiling. "I've wanted to do that since you walked in. We're at work. Someone could see." "I don't care." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "I spent all night thinking about you. About us. About how completely insane this is and how I don't care because you're the first good thing in my life in years." "Marco. Let me finish." His expression became serious. "I know this is complicated. I know there are power dynamics and contracts and a dozen reasons why we shouldn't do this. But I need you to know, you're not obligated to do this. You're not required to feel anything for me because I'm helping your mother. If you want to keep this professional, we can. Well, respect that. Your job is safe either way. I stared at him. This man who could order violence without blinking. Who controlled a criminal empire. Who held so much power it should have been terrifying. And all I could see was someone trying desperately not to pressure me. Someone giving me a choice even when it cost him. What if I don't want to keep it professional? I asked quietly. His eyes darkened. Then we do this. But we do it carefully. Discreetly. My enemies can't know you're anything more than my assistant. Because the moment they do, you become a target. I'm already a target. Brennan made that clear. Brennan was fishing. He doesn't know anything for certain. Yet. Marco's hand slid to my shoulders. If we do this, Sophie, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. Late nights when I can't tell you where I'm going. Conversations you can't hear. Things you'll have to pretend you don't know. It's not fair to you. But it's the reality of my life. I already know all that. I signed the contract, remember? This is different. Before you were an employee. Now. He searched for words. Now you'd be someone I love. The word hung between us. Love. He'd said love. That's a big word, I managed. I know. Too soon probably. But I don't believe in wasting time with lies. His thumb traced my cheek. I'm falling in love with you, Sophie Martinez. Have been since you sat crying in my father's restaurant, lying to your mother to keep her hope alive. You're brave and smart and stubborn as hell, and I want you in my life in every way I can have you. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to work for him for 6 months, save my mother and walk away clean. That was the plan. Falling in love with Marco Vitali was never part of the plan. But plans change. Hearts don't ask permission. I'm falling in love with you too, I whispered. Which is probably the stupidest thing I've ever admitted. Marco laughed, genuine, joyful, transforming his whole face. Probably. But I'll take it. He kissed me again. Softer this time. Sweeter. Like we had all the time in the world instead of being on borrowed moments between meetings. We need rules, I said when we finally broke apart. Boundaries. Agreed. At work we're professional. No one can suspect anything. Agreed. You have to be honest with me. About your business, your risks, everything. I can't be blindsided again. Marco hesitated. Some things I can't tell you. For your protection. Then tell me what you can. But don't lie. If you can't tell me something, say so. I can handle that. I can't handle lies. No more lies, he promised. As much as I'm able. It wasn't perfect. But it was something. We spent the next hour actually working. Contracts to review, calls to make, meetings to schedule. Slipping back into our professional roles. But now there was an undercurrent. A secret warmth in every accidental touch, every shared glance. This was dangerous. Reckless. Probably the worst decision of my life. But it was also the most alive I'd felt in years. 3 weeks of stolen moments. 3 weeks of falling deeper into something that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. Marco and I were careful. At work we were impeccably professional. After work we'd meet at his penthouse in Tribeca. Never my apartment too exposed. We'd cook dinner together, watch movies, talk for hours about everything and nothing. And we'd kiss. God, we'd kiss like the world was ending. He told me things. About his childhood, watching his father build an empire. About his mother who died of cancer. When he was 16, the same disease killing mine. About the pressure to take over, to be strong, to never show weakness. I never wanted this life, he admitted one night. We were on his couch, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm. I wanted to be an architect. Design buildings instead of running criminal enterprises. You still could. No. I'm in too deep. Have been for years. But I'm trying to transition. Make things legitimate. Takes time, but I'm working on it. How much time? 5 years. Maybe 10. Depends on how cooperative my associates are. And if they're not cooperative, then I deal with it. He kissed the top of my head. But that's my problem. Not yours. Except it was my problem. Because I was in his life now. In his world. And his problems had a way of becoming everyone's problems. I should have seen it coming. Should have known that happiness in Marco's world was temporary. Borrowed. Always on the edge of being snatched away. It happened on a Tuesday. Of course it was a Tuesday. I was at my desk reviewing contracts for a new construction project, when Marco's office door flew open. 3 men I'd never seen before strode in. Suits, but not the expensive kind Marco's usual associates wore. These were off the rack, ill-fitting. And they had badges clipped to their belts. FBI. Can I help you? I stood, putting myself between them and Marco's office door. The lead agent, middle-aged, gray hair, tired eyes, held up his badge. Agent Patterson, FBI. We're here to see Marco. Vitali. Do you have an appointment? We don't need one. He moved past me, knocked once on Marco's door, then opened it without waiting for a response. I followed, heart pounding. Marco was at his desk, phone to his ear. When he saw the agents, his expression didn't change. He calmly ended his call. Agent Patterson. What an unexpected pleasure. Mr. Vitali. We need to talk. Then though I should mention my lawyer isn't present. This is informal. For now. Patterson glanced at me. Privately. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my assistant. She's privy to all my business dealings. Patterson's eyes narrowed. All of them. The legal ones. Which is all I'm willing to discuss without counsel. The agent sat down without being invited. His 2 colleagues stayed by the door, blocking the exit. We're investigating a series of incidents. Missing persons. Assault. Extortion. All connected to businesses and individuals in your network. Marco leaned back in his chair, perfectly relaxed. I run legitimate businesses, Agent Patterson. Restaurants. Construction, real estate. If you have evidence suggesting otherwise, I suggest you present it to a judge and obtain a warrant. We're working on it. But I thought I'd give you a chance to cooperate first. Tell us what you know about Thomas Rizzo. Tommy. The man from the warehouse. The one whose hands Marco had ordered broken. I'm not familiar with that name, Marco said smoothly. Really? As Mr. Rizzo claims you threatened him. Assaulted him. He's willing to testify. Then he's lying. Or mistaken. Or both. He has broken hands, Mr. Vitali. Both of them. Shattered bones that required surgery. Coincidentally, he used to work for one of your construction companies. Also coincidentally, he was fired 2 months ago for theft. Strange how these things happen. Marco's expression didn't flicker. I employ hundreds of people. I can't be expected to know all of them personally. Patterson stood, leaned forward, palms on Marco's desk. Let me be clear, we know what you are. We know what you do. And we're going to prove it. When we do, we're not just taking you down. We're taking down everyone in your organization. Including, he glanced at me, anyone who helped cover up your crimes. My blood went cold. Are you threatening my assistant, Agent Patterson? Marco's voice was ice. I'm informing her that obstruction of justice is a federal crime. That lying to federal agents carries serious penalties. That loyalty to you isn't worth prison time. He pulled a business card from his pocket, set it on my desk as he passed. When you're ready to talk, Ms. Martinez, call me. We can protect you. But only if you cooperate. Then they were gone. The office door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a cell door slamming shut. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Marco stared at the door. I stared at the business card on my desk like it was a live grenade. Finally, Marco spoke. Sophie. They know. They know about Tommy Rizzo. They know about the warehouse. They know I was there. They know nothing. They're fishing. It's what they do. He stood, moved to me, took my hands. They were shaking. Listen to me. Tommy Rizzo is lying to try to get a better deal. The FBI has no evidence. If they did, they would have arrested me, not shown up for a conversation. But they threatened me. Said I could go to prison for obstruction. They threatened you to scare you. To make you turn on me. He cupped my face, forced me to meet his eyes. Are you scared? Yes. God, yes, I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you smart. But don't let it make you panic. He stroked my cheek with his thumb. I have the best lawyers in New York. Nothing is going to happen to you. I promise. You can't promise that. If they have evidence. They don't. And even if they did, I would never let them touch you. You're innocent in all of this. Am I? I pulled away from him, suddenly angry. Angry at him for dragging me into this. Angry at myself for going willingly. I lied to federal agents. I saw you order violence and didn't report it. I've been complicit in God knows what else for the past 3 months. How am I innocent? Marco had no answer for that. Because we both knew the truth. I wasn't innocent anymore. I'd crossed that line the moment I signed his contract. The moment I kissed him. The moment I chose him over every moral principle I'd been raised with. I need air, I said. I need to think. Sophie. Please. Just give me some space. I grabbed my purse and walked out. Past Patricia's concerned look. Past the elevators. Into the stairwell where I sat on the steps and tried to breathe through the panic crushing my chest. What had I done? What had I become? And the worst part, the part that made me want to cry, was that even knowing all of this, even with the FBI threatening me, even with the risk of prison, I didn't want to walk away from Marco. I sat in that stairwell for 20 minutes. Maybe longer. Time felt strange, elastic, like I was moving through water. My phone buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. Buzzed again. This time my mother's nurse. My heart stopped. I answered immediately. Sophie? It's Linda. Don't panic. What happened? Your mom's asking for you. She saw something on the news. About Marco Vitali and an FBI investigation. She's upset. Worried about you. Of course. Of course the news would break today. Of course my mother would see it. Tell her I'm fine. I'll be there in an hour. I hung up and stared at the concrete wall. This was it. The moment where everything unraveled. Where I had to choose between the truth and another lie. Between my mother and Marco. Between who I was and who I'd become. I stood up. Smoothed my skirt. Went back upstairs. Marco was waiting in the hallway outside his office. The moment he saw me, relief flooded his face. Sophie. I need to see my mother. She saw the news. I'll come with you. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. This is something I need to do alone. He studied my face, trying to read what I was thinking. What I was feeling. Are we okay? He asked quietly. I don't know. I need time to think. To figure out what I want. What I can live with. Take all the time you need. But Sophie. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Whatever you decide, know that I love you. That won't change. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and walked away. My mother looked smaller in that hospital bed. Even with the treatment working, even with color returning to her cheeks, she looked fragile. Breakable. Mija. She held out her hand. I took it, sat beside her. Tell me the truth. This man you work for. Marco Vitali. Is he dangerous? I could have lied. Should have lied. It's what I'd been doing for months. But I was so tired of lying. Voice becomes raw, honest. Yes, Mama. He's dangerous. She closed her eyes. And you? Are you in danger? Maybe. I don't know. The FBI thinks I might know things. They want me to turn on him. And will you? I thought about Marco in the warehouse, cold and calculating. I thought about him kissing me on the balcony. Vulnerable and open. I thought about the man who paid for my mother's treatment without hesitation. The man who ordered someone's hands broken. The man who loved me. The man who terrified me. I don't know, I whispered. Mama, I'm so sorry. I lied to you. About everything. The insurance never approved. The treatment. I didn't have the money. Marco paid for it. All of it. That's why I work for him. That's why I can't just walk away. And I think I'm in love with him, which makes me the stupidest person alive because he's exactly the kind of man you warned me about. But he saved your life and he looks at me like I matter and I don't know what to do. The tears came then. Hard, ugly crying. The kind that shakes your whole body. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she squeezed my hand. Sophie. Look at me. I looked up through blurry eyes. Your whole life I've taught you to be good. To be honest. To do the right thing. She paused, catching her breath. But I also taught you to survive. To protect the people you love. To make hard choices when there are no good options. But Mama. Let me finish. This man Marco. He saved my life. Maybe for selfish reasons. Maybe because he wanted something from you. But he saved me when no one else would. When the insurance companies and the hospitals and the whole damn system said I wasn't worth saving. So here's what I think. You don't owe him your soul. But you don't owe the FBI your loyalty either. They weren't there when I was dying. They weren't there when you were working yourself to death trying to save me. What are you saying? I'm saying you get to choose what kind of person you want to be. And whatever you choose, I'll love you. Well, support you. Because you're my daughter and you've already sacrificed enough for me. I don't want you to go to prison, Mama. I don't want that either. But I also don't want you to betray someone you love to save yourself. That's not the woman I raised. She pulled me closer, stroked my hair like she did when I was little. Whatever happens, Mija, we face it together. Like we always have. Martina's women don't break, remember? I nodded against her shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of her, grateful beyond words that she was alive. That she was here. That I hadn't lost her. Yet. I went back to Marco's penthouse that night. Used the key he'd given me 3 weeks ago. He was standing at the window looking out at the city. Hands in his pockets. Lost in thought. I talked to my mother, I said from the doorway. He turned. His expression was guarded. Preparing for bad news. And she told me to choose what I can live with. I walked closer. So here's my choice. I'm staying. With you, working for you, being with you. But I need something in return. Anything. Truth. Complete truth. About your business. About the risks. About what the FBI might have. Can't make good decisions if I don't know what I'm dealing with. Marco was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Hey. Truth. All of it. He told me everything. About the legitimate businesses that were actually fronts. About the construction unions. He controlled. About the protection money. The gambling operations. The network of corruption that stretched. From Brooklyn to Manhattan to New Jersey. He told me about Tommy Rizzo stealing from the pension fund. About the other men he'd hurt or threatened or destroyed over the years. About the violence that came with his world, necessary and terrible in equal measure. And he told me about his plan to get out. To transition everything legitimate within 5 years. To become the businessman he'd always wanted to be instead of the criminal his father had trained him to be. It might not work, he said. The FBI might catch me first. My associates might turn on me. I might end up in prison or worse. And if that happens, then I need you to walk away. Testify against me if you have to. Save yourself and your mother. I won't blame. I'll make sure you have immunity, money, everything you need. What if I don't want to walk away? Marco cupped my face in his hands. Then you're crazier than I am. But I'll take it. I kissed him. Long and deep and full of all the complicated feelings churning inside me. We're going to get through this, I said when we finally broke apart. Together. Together, he agreed. The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. And the best. My mother's treatment continued. She got stronger every day. By March she was in remission. By April, was planning to come home. The FBI investigation continued too. Agent Patterson called me twice. Left messages I didn't return. But there were no more visits. No arrests. Whatever evidence they thought they had wasn't enough. Marco started transitioning his businesses. Slowly. Carefully. cutting ties with the illegal operations piece by piece. It wasn't easy. Some associates didn't want to change. Some threatened. Some left. But Marco was patient. And absolutely ruthless when he needed to be. I learned the business. The real business. Sat in on meetings I probably shouldn't have attended. Learned how to read contracts for hidden meanings. How to negotiate with men who didn't respect women. How to smile and look harmless while memorizing every word for later analysis. I became good at it. Too good maybe. And through it all Marco and I grew closer. We argued about business decisions, about his protective instincts, about my stubborn independence. But we always came back together. He taught me things. How to read people. How to recognize threats. How to protect myself in a world that saw me as a weakness to exploit. I taught him things too. How to relax. How to laugh without looking over his shoulder. How to imagine a future that didn't end in violence or prison. We took a weekend trip to the Catskills in May. Just us, no business, no phones. We hiked and talked and made love in a cabin that smelled like pine trees and possibility. I could get used to this, Marco said one morning. We were on the porch drinking coffee, watching the sunrise. What? Peace and quiet. Normalcy. A life where I'm not constantly watching for threats. Where I can just be Marco, not Marco Vitali, head of the organization. You could have that. We could have that. Maybe. If I can make the transition work. If the FBI doesn't get me first. If my enemies don't kill me. He turned to look at me. A lot of ifs. Then let's make them into whens. When you transition. When we're safe. When we can build a real life. Together. He kissed my temple. When. I like that better. The crisis came in June. One of Marco's associates, a man named Dominic Russo, decided he didn't want to go legitimate. He'd built his operation on the illegal businesses. He wasn't about to let Marco dismantle his income stream. So he made a deal with the FBI. Marco got a call at 2 a.m. A warning from someone inside the bureau. Russo had given them everything. Documents. Testimony. Recordings. The FBI would be at our office by 9 a.m. with arrest warrants. You need to run, I said immediately. Leave the country. Go somewhere without extradition. No. Marco. I'm not running. I'm done running. Done hiding who I am and what I've done. He pulled me close. But you need to go. No. Tonight. I'll have someone drive you to your mother's. Pack a bag. Get ready to disappear. You need to. I'm not leaving you. Sophie. I said I'm not leaving you. We face this together. Remember. He stared at me. Then he kissed me hard and desperate. God, I love you. Even when you're being impossibly stubborn. Especially then, I said. We spent the night preparing. Marco called his lawyers. Set up contingency plans. Made arrangements for his legitimate businesses to continue if he was arrested. And he gave me an envelope. If things go bad, he said. If I end up in prison. Open this. Follow the instructions. It'll keep you and your mother safe. What's in it? Everything you need. Money. New identities if necessary. Contacts who can help. He pressed it into my hands. Promise me you'll use it if you need to. I promise. At 8 a.m. we stood in his penthouse watching the sunrise over Manhattan. His arms around me. My back against his chest. Whatever happens, I said, I don't regret any of it. Not the contract. Not falling for you. Not choosing this life. Even the FBI and the arrest warrants and the possible prison time? Even that. Because I got you. And I got my mother. And that was worth every risk. Marco turned me around. Looked at me with those dark eyes that had terrified me once and now made me feel safe. When this is over, and it will be over one way or another, I'm going to marry you. Make it official. Make sure the whole world knows you're mine and I'm yours. That's a hell of a proposal. That's a promise. And I keep my promises. The buzzer rang. Security calling up. The FBI had arrived. They arrested Marco. Handcuffs and everything. Agent Patterson read him his rights while I stood there trying not to cry. "Ms. Martinez," Patterson said, "you should come with us too. Answer some questions." "She has nothing to say without her lawyer present," Marco said firmly. Patterson looked at me. "That true? You want to lawyer up?" I thought about the warehouse. About Tommy Rizzo. About all the things I'd seen and heard and suspected over the past 8 months. I thought about my mother alive because of Marco's money. I thought about the man I loved who'd saved us both even though it cost him everything. "Yes," I said. "I want my lawyer." Patterson nodded. Not surprised. Maybe even respecting it a little. "Smart girl. Hope it's worth it." They took Marco away. I watched the elevator doors close on him, his eyes never leaving mine until the very last second. Then I called his lawyers. Called my mother. And called Patricia. "I need you to teach me how to run the businesses," I said. "The legitimate ones. Marco's going to need someone he trusts managing things while he's dealing with this. And I'm not going anywhere." "Welcome to the family," Patricia said. The trial lasted 8 months. The FBI had evidence, plenty of it, but Marco's lawyers were good. Really good. They poked holes in Russo's testimony, challenged the recordings, argued entrapment and coercion. In the end, Marco pled guilty to lesser charges. Racketeering. Tax evasion. He got 5 years. Good behavior, he'd be out in 3. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than life in prison. I visited him every week. Told him about the businesses, now completely legitimate. About his associates, who'd followed his lead and gone straight. About my mother, healthy and cancer-free for over a year now. About how I was managing, surviving, building a life I could be proud of. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for," Marco said during one visit. "You gave me plenty of credit. You just also gave me a chance to prove it." He reached across the table, took my hand. 3 years. Then we get married. Have that normal life we talked about. I'll be waiting. I know you will. You're loyal to a fault, Sophie Martinez. Only to people who deserve it. I squeezed his hand. Looked at the man I'd fallen for in the darkest moment of my life. The man who'd saved my mother. The man who'd shown me I was stronger than I ever imagined. The man I'd lied for. And would lie for again if I had to. So that's my story. How a lie changed everything. How I went from a waitress in East Harlem to running a business empire. How I fell in love with a dangerous man and chose him anyway. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I wish I'd made different choices. The answer is no. Because my mother is alive. Because I found love in the darkest place. Because I discovered strength I didn't know I had. And because in 3 years when Marco walks out of prison, we're going to build the life we've been dreaming about. Clean. Legitimate. Normal. Well, as normal as our life can be. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. The important part is this. Sometimes the biggest lies we tell aren't to other people. They're to ourselves. I told myself I was doing it for my mother. That it was temporary. That I'd walk away clean when it was over. But the truth? The truth I was lying about. I wanted this life. I wanted Marco. I wanted to be more than a waitress serving pasta and dreaming of better things. The lie that changed everything wasn't the one I told my mother about the insurance. It was the one I told myself about who I really am. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Because sometimes the best lies are the ones that lead us to the truth.